This is our protagonist, Rain, one of the heroes whose life once appeared perfect and beautiful on the surface. Yet everything was suddenly turned upside down when he was cast out of the hero's party, and the only reason for that was because he possessed just one single ability, the power to control animals. Beast tamers form contracts with many different kinds of animals in order to utilize their unique abilities, but unfortunately, beast tamers are not considered particularly suitable for direct combat. Even so, throughout all the time Rain spent within the hero's party, he always gave everything he had in his role, striving with all his might to support his companions in every way possible. However, in a completely unexpected turn of events, the party expelled him because they believed he was useless. At first, Rain thought they were joking with him, but the heroes Arios, Agus, Leon, and Mina quickly proved otherwise. He was utterly shocked by their insulting words when they told him that he was nothing but a burden to them, that he was incapable of harming enemies, and that all he ever did was cause trouble for his comrades. He had never imagined that everyone viewed him as a worthless person, and the blow struck him so deeply that he removed his cloak and walked away. Amid the mocking laughter of his former teammates, Rain sat alone, drowning in thought over everything that had happened. People had always looked down on him during missions simply because he was a beast tamer and nothing more. As he sat there uncertain of what to do next, a group of children suddenly surrounded him and began asking about his work as a hero. Rain grew flustered and did not know how to answer them, but the children were excited to see him use his ability, so he formed a contract with an eagle to demonstrate his skill for them. Afterward, Rain learned that the hero's party did not have a particularly good reputation among the common people. Yet the children loved him far more than the rest of the group because he always played with them, and they dreamed of becoming adventurers one day so they could earn plenty of money. The moment he heard about adventurers, an idea flashed in his mind. Adventurers were people who accepted quests in exchange for payment, and immediately Rain rushed toward the Adventurers Guild. There, he met a receptionist named Natalie. She was just about to explain the adventurer examination when he asked whether she could tell him more about what adventurers actually do, since Arios's group had always looked down upon adventurers, and because of that, he knew very little about them. When Natalie saw how serious he was, she was surprised and began explaining everything to him in full detail before finally telling him about the adventurer's test after confirming he was ready. However, when she learned that he was a beast tamer, she became worried and feared he would not be able to work alone. Her words pierced his heart just as painfully as the insults from his old teammates. Yet despite that, Rain tried to encourage himself and began his first examination. His task was to defeat 10 goblins and gather 20 bundles of herbs. Thanks to his beast-taming abilities, he quickly located the 10 goblins and completed the F-rank mission with ease. Suddenly, he heard a scream coming from afar. Rain rushed toward the source of the sound and found a girl cornered before a killer tiger, but the small weapon he carried was barely enough to scratch such a monster. While distracting the tiger away from her, he told the girl to run immediately. Yet in that moment, there were no animals nearby for him to tame, nor any weapons around for him to use. As he desperately thought of a solution, a girl suddenly appeared behind the tiger, leapt dozens of meters into the air, and struck the killer tiger in the back with a devastating blow that inflicted massive wounds upon it. After defeating the enemy in a single strike, she shyly turned around and sat atop the tiger's body. She was a girl with pink hair and carried the noble aura of aristocracy, and her name was Kanade. The moment Rain focused on her features, he realized that she belonged to the Spirit Cat clan, one of the most powerful clans in existence, and in fact, the rarest of them all. But suddenly, signs of exhaustion appeared on her face, and she collapsed to the ground. Rain hurried toward her in panic, believing she had been injured, but when he leaned near her ear, he heard the sound of her stomach growling and realized she was not wounded at all. She was simply starving, so he shared his food with her. He continued staring at her in disbelief that she was truly real, because it was widely known that the Spirit Cat clan was on the verge of extinction despite being one of the strongest clans alive. Kanade told him she had not eaten anything in several days, and after satisfying her hunger, she introduced herself properly. Rain introduced himself as well, but he was surprised when she gently corrected him and asked him to call her only by her name, without titles or formality. Curious, Rain asked why she was in the forest, and she explained that she had grown tired of the peaceful life deep within the mountains, so she decided to go on an adventure. And there she met Rain, as though fate itself had brought them together. Before anything else, she asked him to tell her about his life. Rain did not understand why, and he had always felt uncomfortable speaking about his past, but despite that, He told her everything. The moment she learned that he had been expelled from the heroes' party, Kanade felt deep sorrow for him. Rain was filled with gratitude because she understood him, and although she was furious at the people who had thrown him away, she chose to let it go when she saw that he himself no longer cared much about it. Rain felt a bit embarrassed, but suddenly he patted her on the head to thank her, and Kanade became extremely happy from the gesture. Even Rain himself had not expected to do such a thing without thinking, but when he saw that she was not bothered by it, he ignored the matter. Then suddenly, Kanade regained her focus and told him something important. She said that Rain was not useless at all. In fact, he was incredibly powerful, and his beast taming ability was special and exceedingly rare. She added that from the moment she first saw him, she felt a strange sensation, like electricity coursing through her body, as though he possessed some kind of power affecting her. He might even be capable of controlling her, and if he truly could do that, then perhaps he could control the entire Spirit Cat clan, because only an extremely small number of humans in the entire world were capable of such a feat. Yet, when Rain thought about it, he realized that what mattered most to him was not the ability to control one of the strongest clans in existence, but rather to remain close to Kanade. Then he bit his finger to draw blood, and began preparing a contract with her. During the contract's formation, Kanade needed to willingly say her own name of her own free will in order for the contract to be completed. Otherwise it would fail. Unexpectedly, Kanade spoke her name willingly as if she were agreeing to form the contract with Rain, which made him incredibly happy. The contract was completed when a red circular crest appeared upon her hand, and the two shook hands as a greeting to mark the beginning of something new. Who could have imagined that a beast tamer like Rain, who had only just lost his team and his purpose, would manage to form a contract with one of the strongest clans in existence, and in such a heartwarming way? But before returning to Fire City, they first needed to finish the adventurer mission. Suddenly, when Kanade saw him forming a temporary contract with a rabbit, she grew a little jealous, though she still found herself drawn to the fluffy cotton rabbits. Then when she watched him form temporary contracts with several rabbits to help gather crops, her jealousy grew even stronger, as if he were dealing with multiple people at once. Yet Rain was far too kind and innocent to understand anything that was happening, which only irritated Kanade further. In an incredibly short amount of time, Rain completed the required task and passed the examination, and thus Natalie granted him an F-rank adventurer card, along with the quest reward of 50 copper coins. She advised him that the rewards would increase as he rose in rank, and she confidently told him that she believed he would advance quickly, considering he had completed the test in record time. After receiving the money, Rain turned to Kanade and told her that from now on, he would begin accepting quests, and she happily agreed, deciding to support him with all her strength. Suddenly, a rude man approached them, and the moment he saw that Kanade belonged to the rare Spirit Cat clan, he became greatly infatuated with her. She responded coldly, but that only made him more excited, and he asked her to go eat with him. Then he began belittling Rain in front of her, which enraged Kanade when he spoke badly about the young man she had just met. Without hesitation, she shouted at him before everyone in a loud, clear voice, declaring that Rain was the master who controlled her. His eyes widened in astonishment, and he burst into laughter. How could anyone possibly control a powerful clan such as the Spirit Cat clan? And when he saw the girl exaggerating in her praise and insisting that Rain was an extraordinarily powerful and exceptional beast Tamer, jealousy flared inside his heart, and he decided to challenge Rain, making Kanade herself the wager between them. Despite the many rumors that had been circulating about Rain, he realized that if he tried to avoid the fight, that young man would most likely end up causing trouble for Kanade as well. And so Rain chose to take the risk and face it head-on, knowing that he would either win or lose. In a shocking turn of events, only a few seconds had passed from the very start of the fight before Rain managed to defeat him with complete ease, snatching victory away before his opponent could even understand what had happened. At the same time, the other man was clutching his arm in intense pain, screaming at the top of his lungs. Natalie heard the commotion and hurried over to see what was going on, only to discover that it was that very same troublemaker who had been disturbing the guild lately. She apologized to Rain for his behavior and told him that the guild was already considering stripping him of his status as an adventurer. But before she could finish speaking, that man grabbed the edge of her clothes, and Natalie taught him a lesson he would never forget for as long as he lived. After she was done with him, Natalie completely changed her tone and asked Rain how, when he had barely even begun the adventurer examination, he had already managed to form a contract with one of the strongest clans in existence. Her questions frightened both Rain and Kanade, and they immediately began apologizing to her. When she realized she may have gone a little too far in her approach, she apologized as well, said that she had only been joking around, then bid them farewell, and returned to her work. Rain remained deep in thought, unable to understand how he had obtained the power that had allowed him to defeat that man. At that point, Kanade explained to him that what had happened was because of the contract he had formed with her. Since he had entered into an agreement with one of the strongest clans, he had also received a boost in power, equal to the strength of the Spirit Cat clan itself. Rain was utterly stunned because it was obvious that no one in his hometown had ever formed a contract with one of the strongest clans before. Kanade was also incredibly happy because he had stood up to protect her earlier, and that made Rain feel so embarrassed that he could barely respond. After that, the two of them set out to carry out the quest assigned to them. Kanade had imagined that adventurers fought with giant swords or rescued kidnapped princesses, but the task turned out to be nothing more than gathering herbs. So Rain explained to her that as long as he was an F-rank adventurer, which was the lowest rank, he could only accept simple quests. When she heard that, Kanade tried to raise his spirits and helped him gather the herbs, but unexpectedly, the rabbits with whom Rain had formed temporary contracts had already finished the task, which left Kanade confused and drove her to accuse them of cheating. She felt sad because, despite being Rain's companion, she had not been able to do anything that truly helped him. At that exact moment, the two of them heard screams and cries coming from the distance, and they immediately rushed together toward the source of the noise. There, they saw a group of large, intimidating men with frightening appearances harassing and surrounding an old man. From what Kanade knew through her own adventures, those men were members of the Black Fang gang, and their number exceeded 100. They were brutally cruel, utterly devoid of morals, and brought disaster wherever they went, making them an extremely dangerous enemy. For that reason, she advised Rain that they should go and seek help, but Rain felt there was no time for that, and that something had to be done immediately. When Kanade saw his courage, she was filled with pride in him. Rain asked her to protect the old man while he dealt with the rest. The moment he finished speaking, the two of them charged forward like a storm and brought the men down one after another. During those moments, Kanade began thinking about Rain with growing concern, and she wondered to herself whether he might have harmed himself when he formed the contract with her after receiving the power of one of the strongest clans. Would it not have been better if she had been the one standing at the front and fighting in his place? Would that not have been more appropriate? But Rain was always the one who stepped forward to protect her, and every single time she saw him fight, she could not take her eyes off him, while her heart beat faster and faster. After they had dealt with the gang members, Rain was surprised when he saw that Kanade's face had turned completely red, which prompted her to explain herself in a hurry and quickly change the subject. Then the old man stepped toward them to thank them. Rain was surprised that a merchant like him had no guards with him, but the old man replied that he had in fact hired a guard, only for that guard to run away the moment trouble began. Even though they had saved him, the old man warned Rain that the Black Fang gang would undoubtedly return to avenge their comrades, and he advised him to be careful. He assumed Rain would feel fear and back down, but instead, he was stunned when Rain asked to go to their hideout and capture them all, because he knew those men were violent and obsessed with revenge, and that if they were not arrested, they would create even greater trouble, with the merchants in the city becoming the first victims. Rain had already managed to locate the gang's hideout thanks to a small squirrel. At the same time, Kanade was feeling frustrated with herself because although she was bound to him, she believed she was unable to do anything that truly benefited him. After expressing that feeling, she regained some of her optimism and asked him about his plan. He told her that his strategy depended on using Account B through a temporary contract, because it possessed a venom that caused paralysis throughout the body, and that would help him disable the guards. Kanade was astonished, because bees were insects, so how could Rain possibly control them? He explained to her that he had also trained in his hometown in insect taming, which was a branch of beast taming specialized specifically for insects. The moment she heard that, Kanade's admiration for his talent deepened even more, because the more she learned about him, the more amazed she became by him. After that, Rain asked Kanade to help him by returning to the city to request support, and that shocked her once again, because up until that moment she still had not been given a task through which she could help him directly. Even so, she agreed with renewed optimism and returned to seek aid from the Night Knights, a unit responsible for protecting cities and towns and operating under the authority of the state. The moment Kanade left, the Count Bees had already fully gathered, and Rain began forming temporary contracts with them to bring them under his control. At the same time, Lean and Mina were running at full speed as they fled from the gang. They had wanted to gather some money before beginning their mission to conquer the Lost Forest, and for that reason, they had accepted a task they were not allowed to fail. If they had known things would turn into such chaos, it would have been far better for them to go meet Arios and Agus instead. Lean was at the peak of her anger, and she began placing the blame on the beast tamer who had been with them because he too had run away before them. He had previously told them that he was only a beast tamer and was not suitable for fighting. While speaking about that, she mentioned Rain and said that, despite being useless in her eyes, he at least knew how to fight on the front lines, and he was also capable of taming a large number of animals at the same time. The other beast tamer was stunned by the very idea of taming several animals at once, because beast tamers like him usually could not control even 2 at the same time, let alone 10, since controlling a large number of beasts placed unbearable strain upon their nerves. Even so, Lean was somewhat hesitant because she had seen Rain with her own eyes controlling dozens of animals with a calm face that showed no sign of strain at all. But in the end, she decided to place the entire responsibility for the mission's failure on him alone in order to protect the reputation of the hero's party. She even threatened the other beast Tamer, causing him to run away trembling in fear. And although she was not fully convinced, Mina felt that what that man had said sounded very much like the things Rain used to say. Yet Leon did not want to believe that Rain might truly possess exceptional abilities after all. Meanwhile, the gang members had already been paralyzed by the Count Bees and were no longer able to move. Kanade also returned at exactly the right time with reinforcements, but they were not the Night Knights. They were merely adventurers like Rain. Even so, everyone was left astonished by Rain's boldness, because he had dared to stand against the entire Black Fang gang on his own. Things continued smoothly until they suddenly heard a thunderous roar coming from behind the door. It was the demonic Lizard King, a creature whose strength was ranked at C rank, and the gang had deliberately tamed it for a moment exactly like this. The Lizard King began rampaging violently, smashing its tail in every direction and hurling people all around it. Rain leapt upward and drove a powerful punch into it, and then Kanade followed with a fierce strike to its jaw. Rain ordered everyone to withdraw outside, making it clear that he and Kanade alone would continue the fight. In those moments, memories of his days with Arios's group came rushing back to him. Those people who used to believe he was incapable of doing anything, but now he was no longer the same person he had once been, especially with Kanade now standing by his side as a true partner. As for the people outside, they were filled with worry, hoping with all their hearts that the two of them would come out safely. Fortunately, it was not long before the two of them appeared before everyone unharmed. In that moment, it became clear that Rain had finally begun to earn people's respect after being cast out of the hero's party, under the claim that he was useless. On top of that, having Kanade by his side gave him the feeling that he was capable of doing anything. It truly seemed that things begin to change when a girl enters someone's life. After many long days of sleeping out in the open, they finally managed to rent a room. Kanade was overjoyed by the comfortable bed, while Rain was left in shock, because the workers at the inn had made them share a single room. From the very beginning, he had intended to rent a separate room for each of them, not one room with 2 beds. And because of that, he offered to leave everything behind and sleep outside instead, which deeply surprised Kanade. She grabbed him to stop him from leaving and told him that they had already paid the rent for that room for an entire week. That forced Rain to explain to her that boys and girls were not supposed to sleep in the same room. At first, Kanade rejected the idea and said she would not mind at all if they slept in the same place. But soon her face turned red and she grew embarrassed, then awkwardly told him that as long as he was not going to do anything wrong to her, there was no problem. At that point, Rain sat down and began explaining a few principles of life to her, reminding her not to trust anyone, not even him, because only a short time had passed since they first met, and each of them still knew very little about the other. After he finished speaking, Kanade told him that she did not trust others the way she trusted him, because other people were not like him. And from the very first moment she met him, she had seen him as her partner. When he heard her words, Rain felt a little embarrassed and smiled, then finally agreed, and said that he would not sleep outside again. That night, while he was sunk in deep sleep, there was a cat beside him watching him quietly. Deep inside, she believed that Rain was a kind person, because in the past she had encountered people who approached her with bad intentions, driven by greed for whatever they might gain from her, whether it was money or fame. Since Kanade belonged to the rare and extraordinary Spirit Cat clan, people had always tried to capture her. But the person she met this time, Rain, was completely different. He had merely been surprised by her, and he had no ulterior motives at all. He had saved her purely out of kindness, and he treated her simply and naturally as just a girl, and that made her incredibly happy. She also understood the wound he carried deep inside because of being expelled from his party, and she wished she could help him recover from it. Even though, on the outside, he looked as though he had already moved past it, she was certain that the pain still remained lodged deep within him. A week passed after their first meeting, and during that time, they succeeded in completing many quests until Ryan advanced and became an E-rank adventurer. Then one day, they heard from Natalie about a dangerous guard at Stein Bridge. The story was about a troublesome individual who picked fights with everyone who tried to cross the bridge. Fortunately, no deaths had occurred, but the number of people using the bridge had dropped significantly, and so Natalie encouraged Rain to try accepting that quest. The quest was not assigned a specific rank, and its reward was 5 gold coins. The moment Rain heard that large amount, he agreed immediately without hesitation. After that, they headed towards Stein Bridge, the only road extending from the middle of the continent, where Horizon City was located, to the southern continent. Kanade was greatly fascinated by the beautiful scenery there, and she was intensely curious to learn the identity of the bridge guard. Even Ryan himself was curious, and he expected that since no deaths had occurred, there should have been testimony from the victims. But those who had been beaten chose to remain silent, and because of that, no information about the guard was available, and the true identity of that person remained unknown. That was why Rain kept reminding himself again and again not to underestimate the situation. At that moment, Kanade noticed something flying in the sky. The moment she focused her gaze, she discovered that it was a lovely girl from the rare dragon clan, and her name was Tanya. When she heard someone refer to her as the bridge guard, she clearly did not like that description, and she carried herself with a confidence befitting nobility. Tanya was extremely confident in herself, and she said that she had received special training from a young age because members of the dragon clan, once they reached the age of 15, would set out on adventures so they could become truly powerful dragons. Tanya had always wished to challenge strong people because she was searching for opponents worthy of battle. And now there stood before her an exceptional adventurer accompanied by a girl from the Spirit Cat clan, and that stirred her interest tremendously. Kanade felt that there was no other solution, and it seemed that the two of them would have to fight a dragon from one of the strongest clans. Then she reassured Rain and told him to fight with all his strength, because she herself also belonged to one of those powerful clans. And so the two of them agreed to fight Tanya. From the very first moment, Tanya launched the attack. She struck Rain with a blow that sent him flying away, and then immediately unleashed a breath of fire toward Kanade. In a shocking turn, Kanade was unable to dodge in time, and her tail, the one she treasured so dearly, was scorched, which enraged her intensely, and so she decided to attack and teach Tanya a lesson. The two girls charged at each other and began fighting before Rain, who was astonished by how evenly matched their power was. After that, Rain stepped in to help Kanade. But Tanya suddenly stopped him, seized both of them together, and began spinning them around as though she were whirling 2 insects. Then she used her finishing move and unleashed the full force of her fire breath on both of them at once. Fortunately, at the very last moment, they managed to work together, descend safely, and escape the massive tongues of flame. After fighting someone from the Dragon Clan, Ryan realized that their standing among the strongest clans had not come from nowhere. Because of that, he decided to fight in his own style as a beast tamer, leaving Kanade behind him to keep Tanya occupied. That obedient cat agreed, and she began delivering a series of consecutive strikes to Tanya in the form of a fierce tiger assault. At the same time, Rain concentrated intensely and regained the sense of a creature's presence that he had noticed during the battle. He began by forming a temporary contract with an eagle, then used it to gather the rest of the eagles. After that, he returned to Kanade with a group of eagles with whom he had formed contracts, and he ordered them to fly above Tanya and attack her with their beaks. Although that attack did not inflict severe damage, it suddenly rendered Tanya unable to move, because those eagles were a species known as Peter birds, and their distinctive coloring indicated that they were poisonous. If someone was exposed to that venom in large quantities, then even members of the Dragon Clan could be temporarily paralyzed and lose the ability to move. Unexpectedly, Tanya surrendered with ease, which astonished the two of them. Kanade was so overjoyed that she threw her arms tightly around Rein. Afterward, Rein approached Tanya and offered her the chance to join them. She smiled with mockery and assumed that the two of them intended to sell her to someone. But Rein told her that all he wanted was to speak with her calmly. She answered him stubbornly, saying that she did not like that at all. Yet Rein did not become angry. Instead, he kept his calm smile, and that suddenly affected Tanya and made her face flush red with embarrassment. While she was lost in those feelings, she sensed an unpleasant stare from the cat standing beside her, and she grew tense. Kanade had already warned that dragon not to cause trouble for Rein, or else she would punish her. When they returned to the guild, Natalie was extremely surprised because Rein had already resolved the problem of the bridge guard. She thanked Rein repeatedly, then was stunned when she noticed the red-haired guest standing there. The moment her eyes fell upon the horns and tail, she guessed that the girl was from the Dragon Clan. But Rein quickly interrupted her and lied, saying that the girl was merely a friend he had met during the quest. Tanya was just about to introduce herself in a manner befitting nobility, but the two of them quickly silenced her and dragged her away. As they walked along the road, Rein kept talking to her, yet Tanya would suddenly disappear. Whenever she spotted someone strong, she would vanish at once in order to challenge them to a one-on-one fight, and every now and then she would also try to introduce herself properly, which forced Rein and Kanade to keep watching her constantly until they were nearly collapsing from sheer exhaustion. When they reminded her of what she had been doing, Tanya grew embarrassed. Then Rein told her to leave the city for the time being, because the identity of the bridge guardian was not supposed to spread. He told her that if she promised him she would never do that again, he would allow her to leave. At that moment, Kanade suddenly remembered the reason why Tanya's identity had never spread before, and the reason was remarkably simple. People had been too ashamed to admit that they had been defeated by a girl like her. According to the laws of the Dragon Clan, Tanya was supposed to return and continue her training, but she decided instead to travel with them and train by their side because that would be easier for her. Then she wrapped her arms around Rein's neck and confessed that she admired him, which immediately irritated Kanade, who was standing right beside them, and she did not stop there. Tanya even asked Rein to form a contract with her as well. Even Rein himself had never imagined that he would not only form a contract with the Spirit Cat clan, but with the Dragon Clan too. After the contract was completed, a red crest appeared on Tanya's hand. In that moment, she understood the sensation of what it meant to be under his command, as though she had become forever connected to Rein. As for Rein, he felt as though he had used up all the luck in his life in a single stroke. At the same time, Arios's group was suffering terribly, for they had remained lost in the forest for an entire week, without achieving any result at all. Then, all at once, an idea occurred to Arios. He would lure Rein into returning to help the group, and then, once they were finished with the lost forest, they would cast him aside again. Meanwhile, Kanade and Tanya had become absorbed in arguing over the bed, while Rein lay stretched out on the floor, sunk in deep sleep, completely unconcerned with what was happening around him. In the end, Tanya joined Rein's team. This time, the mission that reached them was the extermination of slimes. Slime monsters were the type that many adventurers ignored, which had allowed them to multiply greatly until they began causing widespread destruction across the farmlands. It was obvious that Kanade did not like slimes at all, because every time she struck them, her hands became sticky and dirty. When Tanya heard that, she confidently declared that she would use her fireballs and put an end to the matter quickly. Kanade looked at her with admiration, because she had found someone willing to shoulder that burden. That brought Rein great relief, because he had been worried that the two of them might not get along. After searching for some time, they still could not find any slimes. At that point, Rein used his fusion skill in order to search for them. He transferred part of his spirit into the body of a bird and linked his consciousness to it, allowing him to control the bird freely. It was one of the skills of beast tamers. Kanade and Tanya were utterly astonished, staring at him with their mouths hanging open, because they had never expected Rein to be capable of something like that. Afterward, he soared into the air to search for the slime nest, and he asked the two of them to guard his body. A short while later, he succeeded in leading them to the place where those monsters were multiplying. Kanade intended to wipe them out quickly and efficiently, but Tanya thought it would be better to let Rein train in magic. When she asked him about it, he He told her that he had previously trained in fireballs and basic healing. Upon hearing that, Tanya encouraged him to try using fireball magic to destroy them. But Rain said that his own power was not enough to deal with such a large number of those green creatures. Even so, he decided to focus just once and then launch a fireball, and the surprise was that his power burst forth in a massive and strange way until all the slimes were completely destroyed. At that point, Tanya explained that the reason for that was the fact that he had formed a contract with the Dragon Clan, and that she was one of them. The magical power of the Dragon Clan was known to be the second greatest power among the strongest clans. That meant the magical strength of a member of the Dragon Clan was now flowing inside him. The moment Ryan heard those words, he nearly fainted because he was now carrying within himself the powers of two of the strongest clans, to the point that he could no longer keep up with them. After that, Tanya and Kanade began training Rain to control his magical power, but he had never expected the dragon instructor to be so strict, and Rain became so exhausted that he was panting desperately, trying to catch his breath. Even so, thanks to that training, he learned most of the methods of controlling magical power. After they received their reward from the guild and left, Rain took the two beautiful girls outside and fed them until they were full. But this time, Rain was the one left in shock, because the amount of food they were eating was so enormous that even an extremely wealthy man might not have been able to afford feeding them. After the meal, Tanya asked Rain where he had learned beast taming. Rain felt that the story was not especially important, but even so, he told them the tale of his beast taming power and how he had learned it in his hometown. His village had been a place where beast tamers gathered, and both his father and mother had also been beast tamers. So from the moment he was born, he had naturally learned taming as part of his life. Even the ability of insect taming, which had astonished Kanade before, was something he had learned from the people of the village. And although the village had been small and unknown, it had once been a good place, because that hometown no longer existed now. The moment the two girls heard that, they felt a measure of guilt, because they had brought his painful past back to his mind. Even so, they still wanted to hear the rest of the story so they could understand him better. At first, Rain hesitated a little, but then he remembered that in the end, they were his teammates, so he agreed to tell them about his past. That had happened when Rain was 12 years old. On that day, his father and mother were busy, so they were unable to continue supervising his taming training, and he decided to train by himself in the training ground at the edge of the village. Rain continued training until sunset. When darkness began to fall, Rain noticed that the sky was still intensely red despite the arrival of night, and he felt that something was wrong. He ran back toward the village with all his strength, but by the time he arrived, it was already too late. The village had been completely burned down because of a monster attack, and Rain was the only survivor. After that, some adventurers discovered the disaster and came to save him. From that moment on, Rain lived and worked at an inn owned by an acquaintance of the adventurer who had rescued him. There, his life went on as he constantly tried to do his very best. His life continued in that way for nearly half a year until he met Ariel's party. By pure chance, Ariel's party was looking for new members, and they invited him to join them. Ryan accepted immediately because he believed that if he joined the hero's party, perhaps he might be able to do something that would prevent the tragedy that had happened in his hometown from ever happening again. But the truth was completely different, because Ariel's party saw him as nothing more than an easy tool that could be exploited for their own benefit. That story threw Rain back into a state of deep sorrow. But then Kanade suddenly took his hand and comforted him. She saw him as a brave hero who always threw himself into danger and tried with all his strength. She and Tanya both understood that he wanted to become a source of strength for others so that no one would suffer the way he had suffered. They reassured him that he was not weak in the slightest. Even Tanya, despite being a little annoyed by his reckless behavior, was at the same time, just like Kanade, proud to have a master like him. The next day, they accepted a new quest. The mission was to exterminate orcs, and it was an E-rank quest. It was not very different from the goblin mission, except that orcs were more intelligent and knew how to use weapons in battle. Although Ryan kept reminding both of them not to underestimate the orcs, Tanya, being a member of a noble clan, was confident that she could never lose to them. But during the fight, Tanya was startled when one of the orcs nearly caught her not once, but almost twice. Fortunately, Rain and Kanade appeared at exactly the right moment and saved her, though that caused Rain to suffer a light injury. Thankfully, however, he knew how to use healing, so he recovered quickly. The guilt and worry were plainly visible on Tanya's face, and she began blaming herself for what had happened. After that, they gathered the spoils and returned to the guild. Once they were finished there, Rain stepped outside and found Kanade sitting alone, looking sad. When he asked her about it, she told him that Tanya did not seem well and had gone off by herself. Tanya was sitting sadly on top of a bridge, where she was approached by a little girl who came to ask her what she had defeated that day. Then the child asked her anxiously whether she had been hurt anywhere, and advised her that if she had been injured, she needed to tell the people around her. The little girl's comfort eased Tanya somewhat, and it made her remember that Rain had been worried about her as well, but she had ignored that because of her pride as a member of one of the strongest clans, and that was what had made her unable to face him. Suddenly, Rain appeared before her, and she became flustered. Then she lowered her head and apologized to him for what had happened earlier. Tears were just about to fall from her eyes, but Rain patted her on the head, smiled, comforted her, and told her that Kanade had been extremely worried about her. When they returned to the inn, Tanya realized that not only was he not angry with her, but he had also been afraid that something bad might happen to her, and he had even given up his bed for her as well. At that moment, Tanya felt that she could no longer stop thinking about him, and she began trying to control her feelings and not let herself be carried away by them so easily. The next day, they set out on another quest. Tanya felt that the time had come to improve their equipment. As for her and Kanade, since both of them belonged to the strongest clans, that matter did not really present any problem. But Rain was an ordinary human being, and so his situation was different. While they were talking and laughing together, Rain suddenly stopped in his tracks, because standing before him was Arios's party. They were walking slowly, and when they met him, they tried to greet him. The moment Rain saw their faces, he felt an intense aversion toward them, so he took hold of Kanade and Tanya and headed in another direction. But Arios was bold enough to call out to him and ask why he had become so cold toward them. He did not stop there. He began reminding Rain of their past when they had all been teammates in the same party, and he claimed that they all felt deep regret. When Kanade and Tanya saw that their master was being troubled, they stepped in front of him and stood there protectively with absolute resolve. The party was stunned when they saw that two girls from the strongest clans were standing at Rain's side, and they were even more shocked when they realized that Rain was capable of giving orders to both of them. After that, they tried once again to persuade him to help them conquer the Lost Forest. They said that since Rain could control all animals, scouting the forest or carrying luggage would be extremely easy for him. That careless way of speaking infuriated Rain. They were the very people who had thrown him out of the party before, and now they had come asking him to carry their burdens for them. Their shifting, self-serving attitude even made Rain himself want to throw a few punches at them, so he refused immediately and without hesitation, then took the two girls and left. But suddenly Mina called out to him. She began telling him an emotional story about saving the world in an attempt to soften his heart. She said that inside the forest there was an armor necessary to defeat the Demon King, and that if they failed to obtain that armor, they would not be able to destroy him. And if that happened, monsters would spread throughout the entire world. She added that those who possessed power could fight, but ordinary people would never be able to. Her words dragged Rain back into his painful past, and he remembered the sight of his village burning, which shook him deeply. In the end, his kind heart overcame him, and he agreed to go and help Arios's party. But they did not welcome him as they should have. Instead, they looked at him with contempt, as if they believed they could deceive the two beautiful girls accompanying him. Although Kanade and Tanya were not pleased with that at all, they did not object, because it was their master who had made the decision. Even so, they warned the party that they had to apologize to Rain properly and respectfully, and that even if they had to kneel and lower their heads, that would still be acceptable. When Arios was forced to kneel and bow his head, he was overflowing with rage, shouting without end. The entire party believed that they had done nothing wrong. Then, Arios stepped forward, seized the collar of Rain's clothes, and scolded him, saying that he did not know how to train his animals. Rain was deeply angered when he heard Kanade and Tanya being described as animals. The moment he saw his two companions being insulted, he threw a punch at Arios and knocked him to the ground. Rain's eyes became terrifying as he warned them not to go near his companions again. At that point, Arios stood back up, provoked him, and demanded a challenge. They agreed that Kanade and Tanya would deal with the rest of the party, while Arios would fight Rain. The first clash was between August and Kanade. Kanade was absolutely furious and wanted to strike him and force him to apologize to Rain. She rushed at him like a storm and nearly left him unable to defend himself. Then August used the technique Flame Blade, and for a moment, it appeared to have an effect on Kanade. Then she suddenly kicked him in a way that made him freeze in place. When she realized he had already used all his power, she decided to fight on while using only half of her own strength. August was stunned by how adorable and terrifying she looked at the same time, and his hands and feet began trembling the moment he heard her say that she was using only half her strength. Without wasting many words, Kanade rushed him again and landed a kick that made blood burst out of him, then sent him flying until he crashed into a tree. On the other side, Tanya was responsible for fighting two weaklings. A mere snap of her fingers was enough to nullify their magic. The sight of the shock on their faces made her laugh. Stubbornly, they tried to gather their magic and attack her again, but every single time, she dispelled their spells with nothing more than a snap of her fingers, because their magic did not affect her at all. When they found themselves unable to fight, they started mocking Tanya's body, saying that she looked like a lizard, and they kept attacking her, while she continued to nullify their magic with a snap of her fingers each time. That repeated humiliation caused them to lose all will to fight, and they collapsed before Tanya. Although she did not enjoy bullying the weak, the moment they insulted her master, she decided to teach them a lesson about true magic. The sky began filling with black clouds, which terrified them so badly that they believed Tanya was about to kill them. But unexpectedly, Tanya had only intended to frighten them. She terrified them to the point that they were nearly about to faint. In the end, she did not do anything real to them because she was afraid that Rain would scold her, and so she allowed them to leave. At the start of the fight, Arios had insulted Rain, but Rain had not immediately exploded in anger. He simply moved first and struck him, and that was how the battle began. Rain truly felt that he was fighting a genuine hero, and he acknowledged Arios' skill in swordsmanship, but he soon returned to his fundamental style as a beast tamer. The force behind his attacks came from the contract he had formed with Kanade, in addition to his training, which had granted him the ability to observe his opponent's movements. Rain carefully studied Arios' fighting style, such as the number of steps he took while attacking and the way he moved whenever he used feints. He managed to understand the pattern of his movements to a certain degree, and every blow Rain delivered carried concentrated power drawn from two of the strongest clans. If Rain had fought with complete seriousness, Arios would have lost without question. That was why Rain told him to surrender rather than suffer injury. But Arios refused and stubbornly persisted. So Rain was forced to use a method involving the Count B to paralyze his movement and make him acknowledge defeat. Even then, Rain still carried anger inside him because of Arios' insult toward his companions. After Arios lost, he tried to act cowardly and pretend that the old relationship between them could simply return to what it had once been. But Rain was no longer as naive as he had been in the past. He raised his hand and punched Arios, though he deliberately held back his strength, because if he had struck with his full power, Arios might have died. At that moment, Kanade and Tanya arrived and rushed forward to embrace Rain. After that, the three of them entered the Lost Forest in order to explore it. The place was incredibly damp and gloomy. Tanya considered burning the entire forest down, but Rain stopped her because many animals lived there. Rain kept thinking that if there truly was a real armor in this place, then most likely no one but the heroes would be able to use it. Then he looked at the map that Arios' party had drawn, and felt that it was no longer useful because the place had changed and evolved far too quickly. Rain remembered how Tanya had frightened Arios' party earlier, and that gave him a small sense of relief. Then Arios began giving them some information, saying that the monster in the deepest part of the forest possessed the armor of truth, the weapon necessary to defeat the Demon King. Yet although he was providing them with information, he still behaved arrogantly and showed no regret at all, causing Kanade to shout in his face. But the simple act of Rain patting both girls on the head made them calm down. Kanade and Tanya both felt that those people were unworthy of Rain's help. In fact, Tanya even thought that if it came down to it, she could defeat the Demon King herself. When Rain sensed that they were worried about him, he patted them on the head and reassured them, telling them that everything would be all right. After that, Rain summoned a bird and planned to merge with it, just as he had done before, in order to scout the forest. Kanade and Tanya remained behind to guard his body. While flying through the sky, Rain discovered a hidden path, and although it was narrow, it seemed to lead toward the deepest part of the forest. Afterward, he returned in order to lead them there, but no matter how far they moved forward, they kept returning to the same place where they had left a mark to identify the way back, and that left all three of them frustrated. Kanade thought that perhaps they were taking the wrong path, but Rain said that he had been following the flock of birds, and while it would be natural for him alone to lose his way, it made no sense for all of them to get lost in exactly the same manner. Even Tanya agreed with him and felt that some kind of trick was taking place within the forest. After that, Tanya drew a magic circle and transported them to the place where they should have arrived. Tanya correctly guessed that there was an illusion spell placed in the center of the tree, and that this was the reason they had kept losing their way. The moment she explained it, Kanade was shocked. Afterward, Tanya entrusted Kanade with the task of cutting down that tree because it was saturated with magic. Removing the tree would allow them to continue forward, but Rain was wondering whether there might be some way to break the barrier without cutting the tree down. Tanya, however, felt that the barrier was extremely powerful. It was not impossible to break, but in her view, it would require a very long time. Kaneda was preparing to throw a powerful punch, but she was suddenly startled by a voice in the air commanding them to leave that place. Then, from within the tree, a white-haired girl appeared, and her name was Sora. Rain quickly realized that she belonged to the Spirit Clan. Like Kanade and Tanya, she too was one of the strongest clans, and she even specialized in magic, to the point that her magical power surpassed that of the Dragon Clan itself. However, the Spirit Clan had disappeared from human sight more than 200 years ago. Long ago, the members of this clan had come to regard humans who cut down forests as their natural enemies. Then matters escalated into conflict between the two sides, so the Spirit Clan withdrew into remote places, and ever since then, they had harbored an intense hatred toward humankind. Rain was just about to greet her, but she immediately drove him away, and she did not stop there. She even planned to eliminate them using her power, which filled them with fear and pushed them to flee at once. They were confused by the reason for her attack, because the Spirit Clan was originally known as a peaceful clan. Rain also felt that the way she had appeared from the very beginning was strange, and he remembered that the reason for that was most likely their approach to the barrier. The whole matter seemed suspicious to him, because even if the Spirit Clan hated humans, could things truly go so far that they would cooperate with monsters? Before Rain could complete that thought, Tanya decided that they should keep moving forward. She would handle stopping that girl's magic, and in the meantime, Kanade would cut down the tree. And as long as Tanya did not defeat the little girl, then that would still be in line with Rain's wishes. But the surprise was that Rain still wanted to try speaking to her again and reasoning with her, which shocked the two girls because of how naive he was. Even so, they had no choice but to go along with his kindness and agree to his idea. When the little girl saw them return once again, she became deeply annoyed and started driving them away all over again. She completely ignored Rain's words and immediately began using magic to eliminate them. Kanade and Tanya sensed the danger and were on the verge of attacking her, but Rain stopped them. He believed that he could endure those attacks and that he would not give up because he was a beast tamer. And as long as he faced the matter seriously, he would be able to convey his feelings to the other side. Rain did not show the slightest sign of distress from those attacks, and that surprised Sora greatly. She could not understand his behavior, and she asked him whether he was truly human or not, because she feared that he might be like those humans who had destroyed her homeland. Although he could not assure her that he was not a bad person, he told her that all he wanted was for her to trust that he would never harm them. Sora remained calm and was unmoved by his words, then fired another arrow at him. Fortunately, Kanade and Tanya managed to stop it. The two girls were forced to step in and defend Rain, and they assured her that he was not a bad person. When Sora saw the three of them arguing in front of her, she felt that humans were strange. Even the Dragon Clan and the Spirit Cat Clan seemed strange to her, because she had never met people like them before. In the end, Sora agreed to sit down and speak with them. When she heard Rain explain that he had come in search of the armor of truth in order to help the hero's party, but had been held back by that barrier, she told them that the barrier had been created by her and that she could not allow them to destroy it because that barrier blocked the road leading to the Spirit Clan village. She could not allow the rest of her clan to be exposed to danger. But Tanya asked her, "Isn't what you're doing basically the same as covering for monsters?" Sora replied that there was no armor of truth in this forest to begin with, and that the deepest point within it contained nothing except the road leading to the Spirit Clan village, while the armor of truth was actually kept by the Spirit Clan itself. At that point, the three of them understood that the hero's party had been deceived. Sora added that if they needed the armor in order to defeat the Demon King, then she was willing to lend it to them. Then she disappeared for a little while, and later returned carrying a large shield, her face expressionless, which surprised Rain. For even though she hated humans, she hated monsters even more than that. And so the three of them received the shield with ease. They wanted to offer her something in return, but she refused and said that the armor of truth was tied to an old agreement between the Spirit Clan and the former heroes, and that she was doing nothing more than carrying out that agreement. After receiving the armor, the three thanked her and returned to the city, while she remained watching them as they walked away, and it was obvious that she wanted to say something. It seemed that Rain noticed that, so he returned and asked her. Sora hesitated, and the words were difficult for her to say, because if she revealed too much, Rain's team would most likely rush to help her, and that would drag them into her problem. For that reason, the little girl refused to speak, but Rain cut her off and said that no matter how great the danger was, they would not care. Tanya and Kanade spoke as well and assured her that they would help her without hesitation. Once Sora became certain that they were people who could be trusted, she decided to tell them her story. She said that she had a twin sister named Runa. Her sister was different from her in personality, yet the two of them understood each other very well. The sisters were responsible for the barrier that led to the hiding place of the Spirit Clan. That duty was a little boring, but Sora was happy as long as she was together with her sister. However, one day, because they had a task to carry out, they went a little way beyond the barrier, and there they encountered a monster who called himself the Demon King. Although they tried to run away, he chased after them, and they were forced to fight. But not only were they unable to defeat him, he also kidnapped Runa. The name of that monster was the Dark Knight, and he was a C-class monster. Under normal circumstances, he should not have been an enemy that one of the strongest clans would be unable to defeat, yet his abilities were extremely troublesome because he was capable of nullifying magical attacks, and for that reason, only physical attacks were effective against him. And since the Spirit Clan was known for specializing in magic, there was a major conflict between their fighting style and his. According to Sora, the goal of the Dark Knight was to eliminate his enemies, that is, the strongest clans. He ordered Sora to remove the forest barrier if she wanted to save Runa, but she could not agree to that demand because it would expose her entire clan to danger. And by herself, she was incapable of doing anything, so she asked the village chief for help, but he told her to forget about Runa because what had happened was the result of their own negligence when they went beyond the barrier. Even Tanya felt that the village chief's words were far too cruel. At that moment, Sora no longer knew what to choose, her sister's life or the safety of the entire village. That left her crushed and broken. When Rain saw her in that state, he offered to help her rescue her sister, and the girl was filled with gratitude and threw her arms around him, crying loudly. The Dark Knight had ordered Sora to remove the forest barrier before sunset that very day, or else Runa would not remain safe. So Rain's team hurried to search for him. Sora said that she wanted to go with them, but Rain reassured her and asked her to remain behind, because if she went with them, the Dark Knight might think she had betrayed him and harm Runa. At night, they saw the Dark Knight with their own eyes, and Runa was tied up in a high place. The three of them seized the opportunity and charged together to attack the Dark Knight. They used magic to distract him. Then Kanade rushed forward and landed a physical blow to his head, while Rain drove a direct punch into his stomach. But despite those attacks, that man did not fall. The Dark Knight recognized Rain as a hero, and he also realized that it was Sora who had asked them for help, so his anger flared because he felt that she had betrayed him. He immediately tried to kill Runa, but fortunately, Tanya's wings stopped the attack. Then Tanya freed the girl from her restraints and rescued her, leaving the rest to Rain and Kanade. The enraged Dark Knight began unleashing his attacks, and in that moment, Rain understood that the reason he had been able to infiltrate the Spirit Clan village by himself was because he possessed monster powers that he had received from the Demon King. Rain felt that the situation was extremely dangerous, because if the battle continued like that, the entire forest would be destroyed. So he asked Kanade to stop his movement, while he focused all his strength into a single punch in order to strike him with it. Kanade feared that her punch might not be enough, but she still obeyed Rain's orders. At the same time, Rain focused on forming a temporary contract in order to summon the Count Bees once again. Even though he knew that those bees would not be able to paralyze the enemy, they were still capable of distracting him a little, which would make it easier for Kanade to finish him with a punch. Then Rain used enhancement magic on Kanade, multiplying her power even further. And just as Rain had expected, that punch made the Dark Knight vanish in an instant. Kanade was overjoyed by the strength that Rain had granted her. Then he explained to them that this was a special magical skill used by beast tamers, a type of magic that temporarily multiplies natural strength for a short period of time. The reason he had not used it before was because he had never possessed enough magical energy, but after receiving additional magical power from Tanya, he was finally able to perform it successfully. Meanwhile, Tina appeared, carrying Runa safely in her arms. Even Tanya herself was astonished, because that enhancement skill was a lost technique, and yet Rain had somehow managed to learn it. As for Rain, he simply kept scratching his head and saying that things like that always seemed to happen naturally for him. Everyone was happy over their success, and the commotion had also awakened little Runa from her sleep. There, the two sisters, Sora and Runa, were finally reunited. Sora was deeply grateful to them, and she said that if it had not been for Rain's group, then Runa might have suffered things far more terrifying. But those images had existed only in Rain's imagination, because the two sisters quickly returned to their normal selves and began disagreeing and arguing like any two ordinary people. Rain noticed that although their appearances were extremely similar, their personalities were completely different. It also seemed that the two sisters no longer wished to continue guarding that place again, because Sora no longer wanted to live among people who had been willing to abandon her sister, and both of them wanted to see the outside world instead of remaining trapped inside the forest forever. When they heard that, Kanade quickly offered them the chance to join Rain's group and enjoy adventures with them. Tanya did not object to the idea at all. As for Rain, he was worried about them, fearing that they might feel uncomfortable in a party that included humans. But Sora said to him with slight irony, "Weren't you the one who said that among humans there are both good people and bad ones?" She added that she did not know what the rest of humanity was like, but for Rain's sake, she wished to go on an adventure with him. The moment Rain heard their words, he was delighted and warmly welcomed them. After that, the two sisters asked to form contracts with him, just like Kanade and Tanya had done. But when it came to the Spirit Clan, Rain felt that things were a little more difficult, because each race followed a different system. It was true that he could use the basic taming method, but dealing with the Spirit Clan lay beyond the limits of his experience, and he felt as though he were facing an entirely new challenge. Even so, Rain began using contract magic to form a bond with Sora and Runa at the same time. In the end, he succeeded in making a contract with both of them, but because of the power of their clan, it drained an enormous amount of energy from him, to the point that Rain was exhausted and collapsed to the ground. Fortunately, Sora was close to him, so she rushed forward and caught him. When Kanade and Tanya saw that scene, their feelings shifted slightly. After they finished the mission, Rain personally went to the heroes' party and raised the armor of truth before them, leaving everyone astonished. As for Arios, he was still upset, because he had thought he would be able to obtain it within only 2 days, whereas they had spent an entire week without succeeding, to the point that he even suspected the armor was fake. But Rain did not respond to him at all, and instead left them to verify it for themselves. Then, Mina began examining the armor through magic, and proved that it was completely genuine, although Arios still refused to believe it. After that, Arios noticed the presence of 2 new faces, which made him curious to know who they were. But Rain stepped in front of him and told him not to concern himself with them. He had asked the 2 girls to hide their wings, because if people discovered that the Spirit Clan had descended into a human village, it could cause a great panic. Then Rain asked for his payment immediately. After confirming that the mission had been completed, he decided inwardly that he would never deal with that group again. But suddenly, August called out to him and asked whether he wanted to return to the party. Those words made Arios furious, and he began shouting at him. As for August, he wanted everyone to think rationally, and he said that recent events had proven beyond all doubt that Rain's support had been important. The party thought about it for a while, and no one objected. Then August spoke directly to Rain, and told him that he was willing to increase his pay, improve the way they treated him, and even welcome him back as a full member of the party so they could go on new adventures together. But he also added that Rain should not remain attached to what had happened in the past. At that moment, Rain fell silent for a second because he realized that they had not changed at all from what they had always been before. In that instant, Rain understood that he had been naive. At that moment, Rain's group stepped forward and reassured him. Kanade reached out her hand to him and told him that they were waiting for him. When August saw that Rain was about to refuse, he tried to persuade him by saying that if he managed to defeat the Demon King, he would gain immense fame, high status, and a great deal of money. But Rain had no need for any of that. All he had ever wanted was companions he could rely on, yet those people had never changed at all. But now he felt that the very thing he had wished for from the beginning was finally standing before him. When Arios's group failed to convince him to return, they began insulting him and pressuring him again. But Arios alone kept thinking about the fight that had taken place between him and Rain. The pain he had felt back then had not been merely physical pain. It had been a humiliation he could not forget. He was unable to accept that a hero like himself had been defeated by Rain. From that moment on, his heart became filled with hatred, and he decided that he would kill Rain with his own hands. On the other side, they began wondering in confusion, why were heroes alone, the only ones capable of defeating the Demon King? Rain explained to them that the legends said the Demon King once ruled over humanity with such overwhelming power that humans had been unable to resist him. Then the first hero in history formed a contract with the rulers in order to destroy the Demon King, and he infused their blood into his own body. And indeed, he succeeded in defeating the Demon King, liberated humanity, and established a world filled with peace. All of them felt that the first hero had been truly magnificent compared to the heroes of this age. Between them was enormous. That was why only heroes, those who carried the blood of the rulers, were able to develop their power without limit and gather enough strength to defeat the Demon King. But Kanad believed that someone as weak as Arios did not look remotely worthy of such words. As for Sora, she began thinking that according to this logic, Rain might resemble the heroes, because he had been able to form contracts with the 3 strongest clans and acquire their new abilities, which made all of them feel that he had gone beyond the limits of normal human growth, as though he had shattered the barrier and drawn close to the level of the heroes themselves. Kanade also believed that if Rain continued forming contracts with other powerful clans and increased his strength at such a rapid pace, then in the end he might truly possess enough power to defeat the Demon King. When he heard them praising him in that way, Rain grew a little flustered. Back when he had been part of the heroes' party, he truly had kept that goal before his eyes. But after they cast him out, that goal disappeared from inside him. Now, however, he had met Ariel's group, and he was living happily together with them. Even so, to be honest, if he were truly capable of doing such a thing, then he did want to try fighting for himself. But the matter of defeating the Demon King was different from ordinary quests, because it was tied to the lives of countless people, and that was why he was not yet ready to make such a decision. Even now, he did not see within himself the kind of power that would allow him to decide something of that magnitude. And besides, he had reached where he was only because of the support of those around him. In any case, he felt that it had grown late, so he decided that he would think carefully and give them an answer later. Rain could feel that the moment when he would choose his own path for himself was drawing near. Early the next morning, Rain woke up when someone threw a piece of cloth onto his face. That day, Rain's entire group sat together to eat breakfast. They were talking about Rain's strength, which had grown after forming a contract with the 2 sisters, Sora and Runa. Rain had also prepared them a delicious meal thanks to the money he had received from Arios's mission. After that, he decided to buy new equipment from the city. On the way there, the 2 sisters, Sora and Runa, clung tightly to Rain's arms because they were afraid that someone might discover that they belonged to the Spirit Clan. As they walked carefully and fearfully, they were startled when they saw Tanya's followers, who had come searching for her. They were the same 2 men whom Tanya had beaten before in Steinbridge, the same ones whose noses she had broken. When they began praising her, Tanya felt enormously pleased. At the same time, Kanade was speaking with a woman selling fruit by the roadside, and that woman gave her an apple because Kanade had previously helped her carry some things. When the 2 sisters saw how naturally Kanade and Tanya interacted with humans, they were left in shock. Then suddenly a group of human children appeared before them, which only increased their fear. One of the children jokingly said to Rain, "Did you bring new brides again?" And the 2 sisters instantly became embarrassed. When the children said that Sora was cute, she became even more flustered. Runa, on the other hand, reacted in the exact opposite way. She burst into loud laughter and nearly hinted at their true identity while lightly threatening them. But fortunately, Rain and Sora caught up with her and stopped her just in time. Then Sora warned Runa that if she used magic, the Spirit Clan's wings would appear, and if humans discovered that, it would cause enormous trouble. In the end, they arrived at the largest weapon shop in the city. The owner of that weapon shop was a dwarf with a sharp temper, always grumbling and irritated. Kanade felt a little afraid of him because of his severity and imposing presence, But Tanya, on the contrary, believed that dwarves were nothing more than eccentric people. The moment she said that, the shop owner cast her a sharp sidelong glance that terrified Kanade. On the other side, Runa found a weapon in the form of a whip, and its appearance immediately caught her attention. So she began staring at it with great interest. She believed that beast tamers must use this kind of weapon to lash those who disobeyed their orders. Runa's bizarre thoughts alarmed Sora tremendously. As for Rain, he quickly chose a sharp knife that fit perfectly in his hand, and the moment he held it, he felt something strange, even though its outward appearance was completely ordinary. At that very moment, a tall, heavily built man entered the shop, threw down a pile of money before the owner, and asked him to forge the finest sword that would suit him. The shop owner hurried off at once, brought back the smallest longsword he had, and decided to sell it to him. At that point, Rain approached the shop owner and questioned him, because he felt that there was something the man was hiding, since the swords did not look from the outside as though they were truly the best he possessed. Suddenly, silence fell over the place. Then the shop owner smiled and praised Rain, saying that he had a discerning eye. He went on to explain that the knife Rain had picked up, along with everything displayed before them, were nothing more than works he had made with his own hands back when he was still in the learning stage, meaning that he had been selling them at prices higher than their true worth. The moment Sora heard those words, she was forced to re-evaluate her impression of the shop owner. The shop owner grew annoyed by their remarks, so he decided to show them his special collection, the one he took pride in. Rain was astonished that he was capable of forging weapons of such remarkable quality, and yet still deceived his customers in that manner. The shop owner replied that what he had done had been nothing more than a small test for them, because lately customers had been throwing money around and asking for expensive weapons without even thinking whether those weapons truly suited them or not. Worse still, the weapons he crafted with love were often abandoned the moment newer models appeared, and that irritated him deeply. To him, he viewed his weapons as though they were his own children. Then suddenly, Tanya appeared from somewhere no one had noticed, rushed toward the shop owner, and declared that she understood his feelings perfectly, which delighted him greatly. After a short conversation, the shop owner began to take a liking to Rain, and he agreed to forge a powerful weapon made specifically for him, but on one condition. He did not possess the necessary materials. The moment he said that, all their excitement immediately faded. After that, Rain's group returned to the Adventurers Guild. There, they found the place unusually crowded, with people gathered everywhere, so Kanade hurried to ask Sister Natalie, and learned from her that hero Arios was there to recruit support members into his party for the sake of defeating the Demon King. The moment they heard that, Rain's expression changed and became serious, but he did not want Kanade and Tanya to worry about him, so he patted both of them on the head and told them that he was fine. At that moment, Natalie noticed the presence of the two sisters from the Spirit Clan, so she greeted them. Sora hid behind Rain and introduced herself shyly, while Runa stood before everyone with confidence and gave her full name. When Natalie asked about their relationship to Rain, Runa answered in such a strange way that Natalie almost thought Rain was getting close to little girls, forcing him to explain the matter quickly. After that, Rain submitted a quest request to Natalie in order to obtain her approval. The quest concerned an investigation into Midlean Mine, based on a request from Mr. Janes, the owner of the weapon shop. From what Tanya knew, any weapon forged from Midlean ore would be exceptional and would remain with its owner for a very long time. Although that ore was rare, the shop owner had inherited the mine from his ancestors, and for that reason, he had never suffered from a shortage of raw materials. But recently, Midlean ore had almost completely disappeared and could no longer be found at all. Rain did not believe that the mine had simply run dry, because if the materials had truly been exhausted, production should have declined gradually. But the sudden disappearance made him suspect that the problem was coming from inside the mine itself. Without him even saying anything aloud, Kanade and Tanya understood what he was planning. Rain suggested to the shop owner that he allow them to investigate the mine. When Mr. Janes saw that enthusiasm and confidence in Rain's eyes, he agreed to their request. And when Mr. Janes began speaking about the reward he would give them after they helped him, Rain told him that he did not need the money. All he wanted was to keep the weapon that the shop owner would forge for him. Those words surprised the shop owner, but he agreed happily. After that, the group set out. The road to the mine was close, so it felt to them like a short trip. On the other hand, the two sisters, Sora and Runa, were walking behind them in a state of extreme exhaustion, to the point that they started breathing heavily and feeling dizzy, until they could no longer endure it and collapsed like melting ice. So they stopped for a while to rest, and the sisters said that the weather felt unbearably hot. Fortunately, in front of them there was a lake of cold water. Since it looked perfect for swimming, they kept pleading with Ryan to let them get in and bathe. Before Ryan could even finish his instructions, Kanade had already started taking off her clothes, but Tanya rushed after her and stopped her just in time. As a precaution, Ryan formed a temporary contract with a squirrel, ordering it to inform Kanade's group immediately if any danger appeared, while he himself decided to take a short nap. Meanwhile, the two sisters were soaking in the water. After some trouble and a few small incidents, they finally arrived at Midlean Mine. They hid in a suitable place and began observing the situation. According to Rain's thinking, the place was witnessing illegal mining activity, and even the movement of the birds in the sky looked as though they were sending signals to someone. Just as he had expected, the illegal miners noticed the presence of intruders, and they came out before them violently. Rain realized that they were forced to confront them, so he told the two sisters to hold back their blows. But the moment they softened their attacks, those men lost consciousness anyway, which meant Rain could no longer interrogate them or obtain any information from them. Suddenly, Sora suggested that she could see their memories through magic. The two sisters used magic, and they succeeded in learning that Rain's suspicions had been correct. They saw images of those men carrying out illegal mining, and it also became clear that they were originally adventurers. After the two sisters had helped Rain, they asked him to pat them on the head the way he did with Kanade and Tanya whenever they accomplished something. Rain had no choice but to agree, so he patted them both on the head, which made them extremely happy. This time, they decided to sneak inside the mine. Rain warned them to prepare themselves mentally for the possibility that their identities might be exposed, because the enemy had been watching them from the sky, and he was certain that they also had a beast Tamer. The moment they entered the mine, they were suddenly met by a magical fireball speeding toward them, but Sora and Runa stepped forward and managed to block it. The two sisters wanted to finish the matter quickly so that they could earn another pat on the head from Rain, so Tanya and Kanade hurried in to help them. As for the final person, Ryan faced him personally. That man had been carrying out the illegal mining, and yet he refused to surrender. He even tried to stab Rain with a knife, but Ryan managed to bring him down. Even then, the man did not surrender. Instead, he summoned a B-rank monster called a behemoth to fight on his behalf. Tanya's group immediately understood that the man was also a beast tamer. Logically speaking, beast taming required great skill and an enormous amount of magical energy. The man explained to them that he had encountered that monster when it was small, then raised it until it grew large, so that it would never become hostile toward him. The behemoth received its order and immediately lunged at Rain. The force of its attack was so terrifying that everyone feared the entire mine might collapse. While they were fighting the monster, Rain signaled to them to get the rest of the people outside first, to a safe place. Tanya would remain outside to protect them, while Kanade would go in to help Rain. Then Rain told Kanade to stop that man, while he himself would deal with the behemoth because the monster was moving according to that man's orders, and if they managed to seize him, the monster would stop far more quickly. And indeed, the behemoth's blows were immensely powerful, yet its attacks were simple and easy to predict. Rain had already understood the pattern of its movements, and for that reason it became difficult for the monster even to touch him. But if the battle dragged on any longer, the mine itself might collapse completely. On the other side, Kanade had already succeeded in silencing the man and bringing him under control. At that moment, Ryan had come up with a way to defeat the monster, but he feared that he might fail to carry it out. Then suddenly, he remembered Kanade's words, the ones she always used to encourage him, and he decided to trust himself and not let their hopes down. And in the end, Rain succeeded in taming the behemoth and bringing it under his own control, as though he had torn away that man's hold over it, erased it, and taken it for himself. In truth, for one beast tamer to steal another beast tamer's control over a monster is something that is almost impossible. But Ryan thought that if he truly possessed the kind of power everyone kept talking about, then perhaps he might actually be able to do it. The man could not believe that he had lost control of the behemoth, so he tried to issue new commands to provoke it and enhance its power. But the shocking surprise was that the monster attacked him instead, and at that dangerous moment, Rain launched a fireball that stopped the behemoth and knocked it to the ground. The man was unable to understand why he had failed, so Rain explained to him that the relationship between humans and monsters, even with taming, does not erase hostility completely. The monster had sensed that man's aggression, lost control, and that was why Rain had been forced to calm it and restrain its rampage so that he could bring it under control. After investigating the group involved in illegal mining, Rain discovered that they all had one thing in common. Every one of them had bought weapons from Mr. Janes. They had purchased fake tools that he had made back in the days he regarded such work as mere amusement, and when they discovered the truth, they decided to take revenge by stealing midden ore, so that no one would ever again be able to forge weapons from it. When Mr. Janes learned what had happened, he was deeply troubled and filled with guilt, because he had been testing customers and following dishonest methods. Rain did not argue with him, but he understood his frustration, placed a hand on his shoulder, and advised him to correct his mistake. He told him that all people make mistakes, but what matters is that a person recognizes his error and works to fix it. He also advised him to focus once again on weapon forging with sincerity, just as he had done before, and then things would surely begin to go well again. And so Mr. Janes, despite his old age, found himself learning from a young boy, yet he was not upset by that at all. Instead, he decided to try changing for the better. As a first step, he made the decision to forge a special weapon for Rain. The moment Rain heard that, he leaned in and whispered that he wanted the weapon to be made according to his own idea. The two of them spoke in secret, which only made Kanade's group grow even more puzzled and curious. At the same time, Ariel's group was busy trying to recruit new support members, but they could not find anyone suitable. Even when a beast tamer came forward, because he could control only a single animal and could not fight, Arios rejected him immediately. He was also greatly astonished when the man asked whether he could control the strongest clans, because for a human beast tamer, that was something impossible. After Arios rejected the last applicant, he looked tired and bored. Mina believed that not only that man, but many of those who had applied would have been suitable as good support members. But Arios was dissatisfied with everyone, and he kept comparing all of them to Rain. Mina felt that if things continued like this, they would never be able to proceed with their journey, and the mission to defeat the Demon King would remain far beyond their reach. So Mina went and spoke to Arios, telling him that his conditions for choosing people were somewhat too harsh, but he pushed her away violently. He was irritated by Rain's absence, and so he was venting his anger on her. Even though she was not pleased, she endured it and remained silent, simply because this was the mission of the servant of the rulers. After he finished speaking, Arios allowed her to go back and rest. Before she left, Mina advised him not to worry so excessively, because his mission from the beginning was to save the world. But Arios did not see the matter in that way at all, because before saving the world, the thing that occupied his mind above all else was getting rid of Rain by any means possible. The following day, Rain went to the Adventurers Guild and asked about the fate of the people who had been carrying out illegal mining in Mr. Janes's mine. Natalie told him that they had been stripped of their title as adventurers and turned into forced laborers. That was because illegal mining and raising monsters were considered extremely serious crimes, and in her view, that punishment was fitting for them. Rain left the place with clear discomfort written across his face, and then he told the two sisters, Sora and Runa, what had happened. After that, he took them on a walk through the food market and bought them 2 hot dogs that tasted incredibly delicious, so much so that they devoured them quickly, only to regret afterward that they had eaten them so fast. During that time, Runa asked Rain about the abilities he had gained after forming a contract with the two of them, because previously he had received physical abilities from Kanade and enhancement magic from Tanya. For that reason, they wanted to know what had changed in him after the contract with them. Despite their intense excitement to know the answer, Rain himself did not know whether he had gained anything special at all, and his calm, indifferent response was enough to make the two sisters tense and uneasy. They were certain that he was supposed to have received their clan's ultimate magic, because that magic was considered a secret technique far stronger than either high magic or super magic, and only members of the spirit clan were able to use it. Although Sora and Runa themselves could not use it, they had hoped that Rain might obtain it. But the more they tried to explain, the more confused and uncomprehending Rain became, which left the two sisters frustrated, because after the contract, they had not become like the older sisters at all. In fact, things reached the point where they described themselves as failed attendants, and that left Rain at a loss, not knowing what to do. so he had no choice but to pat them on the head to reassure them and tell them not to be sad or blame themselves. At that, they wondered why Rain trusted them to such an extent, when they were the very ones whom their own village had abandoned, and who had encountered many cruel things in their lives. They saw Rain as different, because even though he was surrounded by strong people, he still needed them. At that point, Rain sat down and explained everything to them in detail. He told them about his sorrowful past, and how he had once been a person who lacked confidence in himself, always trying to prove that he was useful, and yet in the end, he was rejected and cast aside. Because of that experience, he had learned his lesson, and he now wanted to build genuine trust with the companions he himself had chosen, and that included Sora and Runa as his comrades, even without the contract. After they listened to his story, their enthusiasm returned, and they became more optimistic again, which brought Rain great relief. While they were walking, they came across a blonde young man who loved causing trouble. His words frightened the two sisters, and they thought the matter was serious. But in truth, he was nothing more than a playful young man who wanted them to go with him. The moment they heard what he said, they looked at him with contempt. That youth had only just come out and happened to see two beautiful girls in the street. Sora's face turned pale with fear, because it was the first time anyone had ever approached her and asked her to go with him in such a manner. Runa, on the other hand, began insulting him and calling him a fool, and the more the two of them responded in that way, the more fascinated he became by them. That young man's name was Aga Floger, and he was the son of the ruler who controlled this city. He kept persistently calling them to go with him, but Sora refused, so he decided to use force. He thought his men would be able to overpower them, but Ryan quickly struck them down. Even then, Aga did not surrender. Instead, he remained determined to take the two sisters by any means. For that reason, he used the people of the city as hostages in order to force Rain to hand the sisters over, because he saw people as nothing more than tools and did not care about them at all. Rain felt that the enemies had spread themselves across different locations, so that if he saved one person, someone else might be harmed, and because of that, he did not know what to do. Although the two sisters wanted to help him, he feared that if they used magic, people would discover that they belonged to the Spirit Clan, and then they might no longer be able to live freely in the city after that. The sisters had become extremely happy with their current lives, and Rain could not allow them to lose all of that. While he was thinking of a suitable solution, an idea came to him, though he was forced to take a risk, so he used a continuous chant of the Fireball spell, which was a special skill of the Spirit Clan, and Sora and Runa recognized it immediately. That alone was enough to terrify the other side and force them to retreat. Then Sora's group came to thank Rain for protecting them, and there were many people in the city as well who were deeply impressed by a beast tamer like him. Suddenly, an old woman stepped forward and advised them to flee that place quickly, which shocked them greatly. And nearby, without Rain noticing, Arios was standing at the side of the road, watching his every movement closely. When they returned home, the two sisters were overflowing with excitement, telling Kanade and Tanya all about the new skill that Rain had acquired from the Spirit Clan, the clan to which they belonged. Rain himself felt the same way, because thanks to that continuous chanting, he had become far more proficient in both power and precision than he had ever been even after his previous training. And all of that was due to the contract he had formed with them. Now, the two sisters, Rona as well, were finally able to hold their heads a little higher with pride because they had come to possess excellent abilities just like Kanad's team. Thank heavens they were safe, and for that reason Tanya and Kanad both felt a measure of relief. Rain had also heard the people's conversations throughout the city, and he discovered that matters were far worse than they had imagined. Aga, it seemed, abducted girls he found appealing and imprisoned them inside the palace. And people were also saying that he mistreated them there. The Lord excessively indulged Aga because he was his only son, and as a result, every one of his crimes was quickly covered up, with no evidence ever being left behind to condemn him. As for Tanya, she was deeply enraged, and she nearly wanted to burn the palace down on the spot, because she realized that in the end, they might target Sora's group, or even Rain himself, or the people of the city as well. Rain, however, thought calmly, and after learning all the dark sides of that city, he wanted more than ever to save everyone. But he kept restraining himself because he still saw himself as nothing more than a beast tamer, not a brave hero. Meanwhile, Kanade and Tanya noticed what was going through his mind, and they understood that despite his sincere desire to save everyone, he was being cautious of such a powerful enemy, wavering between protecting the city and confronting that foe. So they told him that the matter did not concern Rain alone, because they too wanted to protect the city. That made Rain feel the strength of the support surrounding him, and so he decided that he would save the city together with them. At the same time, Aga was ordering the soldiers to conceal the damage that had occurred that afternoon, and he also instructed them to gather information on Rain and bring him to him, because he hated him for the humiliating defeat he had suffered at his hands, and was utterly incapable of moving past it. In the midst of his rage, he summoned a little girl with a beast-like appearance and began tormenting her relentlessly. On the other side, Ryan and Kanade went together to the Night Division in order to file a report on the damage. When they requested an investigation into Aga's violent conduct, expressions of intense fear appeared on the faces around them, and confusion was obvious, to the point that they began stammering and did not know how to respond. After that, several soldiers stepped forward and spoke to Rain, telling him that the matter was nothing more than a minor dispute, and that they would not investigate it. They even laughed in his face and warned him to be careful not to be accused of slandering Lord Aga. There was unmistakably clear. They had absolutely no intention of helping. So Ryan returned after realizing that they were covering up Aga's case, and that even if they opened an investigation, they would never find any evidence. Suddenly, Kanade sensed that someone was watching them. It was a female knight named Stella, and people had mistakenly thought that she was following them, so she bowed her head in apology, which greatly surprised Rain because he had not expected a proud knight like her to do such a thing. Stella was the deputy commander of the Horizon Knights branch. Before they even began speaking, she thanked them, because she had already heard about the adventurer and the girl from the Spirit Cat clan who had destroyed the Black Claw gang, and even she herself, as a knight, had not been able to do anything against them. Because of that, she wanted to punish the wrongdoings of the Lord's group, and she expressed her desire to cooperate with Rain's group. Because of its collusion with the Lord's group, the Night Order had forgotten its true duties and had become concerned only with enjoying its own benefits. It had covered up the crimes of the Lord and his son, and had even grown dismissive toward the very people it was supposed to protect. Even the chief commander Juliet was of the same kind. At that same time, Sora's group came to thank Rain for protecting them, and there were also many people in the city who greatly admired a beast tamer like him. Stella longed for the Night Division to return to its true nature, and she had noticed the appearance the two sisters had taken on when they condemned Aga's crimes, and in that she saw hope, or perhaps a turning point. For that reason, she asked Rain if he was able to grant her that strength so that she could fulfill her wish. Rain felt some suspicion and thought that perhaps this might be a trap, but Kanade reassured him and told him that Stella was not a bad person and that she sensed no strange intent from her. When Rain heard Kanade's words, he agreed to cooperate with her. Stella then asked him what reason drove him to want to condemn the Lord's son, and when she heard him say that he was doing it simply because he saw it as wrong, and because if he was able to do something, then he should do it, she let out a great laugh. She was not laughing out of mockery, but because his honest answer and serious character had impressed her. Then that emotion welled up inside her so strongly that tears began to flow from her eyes. At that moment, Rain took her hand to reassure and encourage her. The first step was for Rain to help her purge the Night Division by means of a carefully laid trap, by spreading a rumor that there was proof of collusion between Captain Juliet and the Lord, hidden inside a warehouse outside the city. Juliet did not believe the rumor easily, because if it were true, that would mean her deeds had already been exposed. For that reason, they had to act carefully and quickly, so that the young knights who were still living in the dream of the ideal knight could be deceived as well. In the end, she ordered the soldiers to begin the operation, but the moment they entered the place, they found Sora, Rona, and their teams surrounding them. Inside the warehouse, Rain used the weapon he had bought from the dwarven shop. It was an excellent weapon, one that helped him strike his targets with perfect accuracy. As for the last shot, he had saved it for Juliet, but she noticed it and managed to dodge. When Juliet saw her fellow knight, she was deeply shocked. Stella, however, did not hide anything. She told her that her companions and subordinates had already taken complete control of the entire Night Division branch, and that they also possessed evidence of her corruption. And when Juliet heard Stella mention Ryan's name, she immediately readied her sword. At that, Stella grew very tense, and she wanted to face her herself. Juliet threatened to execute her on the charge of treason, and then charged at her to fight. The truth was that Stella was not fully her equal, yet she did not fear her and continued standing her ground in battle. She was determined to stab her with a strong dagger that would bring her down to the ground. At the same time, Aga was tormenting the little girl after being informed that Juliet's group had been arrested and that Stella had taken hold of the Night Order. Although he was on the verge of being surrounded, he remained disturbingly optimistic because he still possessed enough forces inside the palace. Then suddenly, a faint sound came from near the window. It was Arios, hidden there, and he offered to cooperate with him against Rain. The moment Aga learned that Rain was capable of commanding the strongest clans, and that he might take away his status, his reputation, his wealth, and even his girls, his rage burst forth violently. At that point, Arios tossed him a ring filled with magical energy and told him to use it to eliminate Rain. The darkness and hatred hidden inside Aga became plainly visible, and that delighted Arios, because it would only make the ring's power grow stronger and stronger. As for Stella, after becoming the commander of the Night Division, she immediately began the investigation. She led the soldiers toward the palace, demanded an urgent investigation into the Lord, and declared that Juliet, the former commander, had been arrested on charges of bribery. But Stella's request was rejected, and a group of soldiers was sent to stand against her. For that reason, Stella's group was forced to put on armor and prepare for an assault. And this time, she also had the support of the two beautiful sisters, Kanata and Tanya, inside the palace. Aga was watching them from outside and mocking them. He also saw that the two strongest clans led by Rain had entered the palace, and he was planning to use that ring to break the contracts that bound them to Rain, so that they would lose their reason for fighting, and he would become their new master instead. On the other side, Rain succeeded in creating a diversion and infiltrating the palace. Their main mission was to rescue the hostages, but Rina was extremely loud, and so Sora and Rain feared that Aga would discover them and kill the hostages. After that, Rona and Sora used search magic, and once they found the people, they began leading them out to a safe place. In that way, Kanade's group, which had taken charge of creating the diversion, would be able to unleash its full power, and afterward, they would be able to capture the Lord, both father and son, and obtain proof of corruption. At that point, victory would tilt to their side. But in that very moment, Rina sensed something strange, because she realized that the enormous amount of magic hidden in the cellar could not possibly be human. She felt a massive magical reaction, and its level was close to that of the two sisters themselves. Rain suspected that it might also be one of the strongest clans, but he could not understand why one of those clans would be in a place like this. For that reason, he left Sora and Rina to continue the search, while he himself headed toward the source of that magical power. Because in a situation like this, ignoring an unknown individual would be a grave mistake. Sora and Rina were worried about him as he went off alone, because that power was on their own level. But they remained calm after Rain touched their heads and reassured them that he would be all right. Rain felt guilty as well, because in his effort to save everyone, their true identities had been exposed. At that moment, Runa stood up and told him that if he did not return safely, she would punish him by making him pat their heads 100 times. After that, Rain began investigating. By chance, suspicion stirred within him regarding one particular room, so he entered it. The scene inside was strange. There stood an extremely sturdy iron cage, and imprisoned within it was someone who looked like a three-tailed fox. There was no way he could have mistaken it, because she belonged to one of the strongest clans, namely, the Ruler's clan. Without hesitation, he broke the lock and hurried to heal the little girl, who was terrified at first. Her name was Nina, and the moment she heard that he had come to rescue her, sorrow overwhelmed her, and she threw herself into Rain's arms, embracing him tightly. Nina belonged to the Ruler's clan, one of the strongest clans. This little girl had once lived a peaceful and happy life in her village, day after day, sleeping in safety and meeting kind villagers who cared for her, until the day Aga appeared and changed her entire life. Aga had forced her to become his prisoner, threatening that if she refused, those kind villagers would be punished. Nina was shy by nature, and so she obeyed his orders. He placed upon her a slave collar enchanted with magical power. After that, he began torturing her and hurting her to satisfy his sick desires. The little girl had been forced to endure all that pain alone, until she became deeply afraid. Rain wanted to save her immediately, but she told him that the collar was saturated with overwhelming magical power. Rain reassured her and asked her to trust him. The little girl sat obediently, waiting for him to save her. Rain tried once again to use control-seizing magic with his own power, but the collar was so strong that the strain became visible on him. The moment Nina saw Rain suffering like that, her guilt toward herself only deepened. Then suddenly, Rain remembered that he did not possess only his own strength, but also carried the power of Kanade and Tanya, and even the strength of the sisters Sora and Runa. So he gathered all of their power into his spell, and at last he succeeded in breaking the collar from Nina. Outside the city, meanwhile, the battle against the soldiers was raging violently. When they realized that they were incapable of defeating Kanade's group, they used the hostages in the cellar as bait. But unexpectedly, the two sisters, Sora and Runa, had already resolved the rest of the problem and managed to bring all of the hostages out to a safe place. Outside, the battle continued to burn fiercely, while Stella prepared to enter the palace and arrest both the Lord and his son. Inside the palace, the moment the Lord saw that matters were no longer stable, he rushed to inform his son. Aga told him that he should flee first, while he himself would remain behind to dispose of the evidence of corruption. At the exact moment everyone entered the palace, Rain had just finished rescuing Nina. Everyone was shocked when they saw yet another girl from one of the strongest clans, and then they went right back to blaming him once again for finding himself surrounded by girls yet again. Rain became flustered and did not know how to answer because for some strange reason he kept drawing girls to himself every single time. Even Sora felt that it was exceedingly rare, because the ruler's clan normally avoided appearing before humans, and yet Nina was here. As for Kanade, she was intensely interested in Nina's soft fur, and the little girl, despite her shyness, remained obedient and silent, simply waiting. Meanwhile, Stella had entered the palace as well, and she was deeply grateful to Ryan. Thanks to him, she had been able to carry out her plan. At that same time, the Lord was holding a few belongings and trying to flee. But when he found everyone waiting for him in the hall, Rain used his weapon and fired a binding rope, pinning the Lord in place. Then, without warning, Aga suddenly appeared, and through the ring, cast death magic, launching a fatal blow at Rain while he was not paying attention. Standing atop the roof, Arios was completely satisfied, believing that he had finally achieved what he wanted. But he had never expected that Rain would remain entirely unaffected, and that threw everyone into alarm. That spell had been of superclass level, a spell known as the Killing Scythe, a form of magic that caused sudden death, and yet not the slightest effect appeared on Rain. In fact, Kanade's group only grew more impressed by him because he was capable of enduring all that magic. However, Runa was thinking about something, and then suddenly she called out to him so that she could sprinkle poison all over his body. The moment Sora saw what she had done, she violently pulled her younger sister back because her action had been far too reckless. How in the world could a servant spray poison on her own master? But the truth was that ever since Rain had formed a contract with them, Runa had always wondered, why had he gained only one skill? Was that not unfair? After that, she guessed that the new skill he had obtained must be abnormal status nullification thanks to the contract with them, and that was why the poison had not affected him earlier. At last, her curiosity got the better of her, and she discovered the true nature of his new skill. Sora, however, was extremely upset because Runa had tested it on Rain without telling her. The commotion the two sisters caused frightened little Nina, and she began trembling. On the other side, Aga was drowning in frustration, unable to believe his own failure. Just as Ariel had once said, Rain was taking everything from him one piece at a time, and that only caused the hatred in his heart to multiply the ring's power. Before long, magical energy began to spread through his body, and it carried a repulsive, foul odor. Then, that purple mass swallowed Aga completely and revived the demonic race once again, the very same race that had been the cause of the ruin of Rain's childhood. The demon that was reborn showed strong interest in what was happening, but the moment he saw that the number of people present here was small, he flew straight toward the city to harm the citizens. Rain immediately realized that the situation was terrible, and he feared for the people of the city. But when he looked behind him, he found his true companions waiting for him. Through that silent understanding between them, Rain began to lay out a rapid plan. He asked Stella to take care of the civilians and of Nina, but at that moment, Nina grabbed the edge of his sleeve and indicated that she wanted to help too. Rain knew that Nina disliked fighting, so he reassured her and asked only that she remain obediently in the rear. After that, Rain's entire group ran toward the city to stop the demon. The moment the demon heard Rain say that he would defeat him, he burst into loud laughter and showed a great deal of interest in him. And the instant they detected an opening, Kanade and Tanya immediately rushed in to attack him. As for Rain, he used the binding rope to distract the demon, while the little squirrel prepared to cast an appropriate spell against him. But the truth was that their attacks were of almost no real use. because when the demon saw himself facing 5 opponents at once, led by Rain and accompanied by 4 of the strongest clans, he asked for permission to summon his brothers to face them. So he summoned a great number of monsters, whom he regarded as nothing more than minor servants, while to Kanade's group they were merely small enemies, but they had never expected that the demon was capable of summoning those monsters without end. Kanade charged with all her might and continued fighting, but she was struck by one of the demon's attacks and fell to the ground. At that point, Tanya, her anger blazing, unleashed dragon breath to fight him. At the same time, Sora and Runa moved to help Kanade, but the dragon breath that Tanya unleashed could not withstand the demon's power, and she collapsed there unconscious. The demon then began launching destructive attacks that shattered houses throughout the city. At that moment, Rain's group used a new form of magic to assault him once more. Rain began enhancing multiple targets, using enhancement magic on both Kanade and Tanya. The two of them rushed at the demon with frenzied force, but their blows hardly affected him at all. Then the demon summoned even more monsters and surrounded Rain's group from every direction. After that, he left his servants on the ground and rose high into the sky, fully determined to destroy the entire horizon. Tanya hurried to release Dragon Breath once more, just to stop him for even a brief moment. At that very instant, a new idea came to Rain, and he wanted to try it, but he knew that carrying it out would place the people of the city in danger. So Sora's group offered to help him by transporting the civilians to a safe place through magic, while during that time, Rain's group would destroy the demon. They assured him not to worry about their identities being exposed, because everyone who had been freed from the palace already knew the truth about them anyway. Once the plan was set, each group went to carry out its part. At the same time, Arios's hero party was still debating whether they should join the battle or not, because they had heard that a demon had appeared, and demons were the vanguard of the demon lord. But Arios refused to provide any support at all, saying that their true enemy was the demon lord himself, and that they should leave this matter outside their calculations. Mina and August wanted to object, but they hesitated in the face of Arios. At the same time, Stella's forces moved toward the battlefield in order to protect the citizens. Stella did not allow them to give in because their duty was to protect both the people and the city together. Suddenly, Sora and Rina came running toward them, drenched in sweat, carrying an urgent request concerning the evacuation of the civilians. The moment Stella heard that, she agreed to help at once. After Stella and her soldiers listened to the plan, they set out to carry it through, leaving Nina in the care of Sora's group so that they could protect her. Meanwhile, Kanata and Tanya were still doing everything in their power to save the citizens from those monsters. Their role was to clear a path so that the people could reach Sora's group's teleportation magic. However, when the humans saw the appearance of the Spirit Clan, and considering that they already carried an old hatred in their hearts toward such beings, they could not trust them easily. They were afraid that jumping into that magic might be extremely dangerous. At that moment, Sora and Rina felt saddened, but the owner of the hot dog shop, from whom they had eaten before, recognized them and came to speak to them. Then the kind old man smiled at them and offered to step into the magic circle first himself. After that, the little girl they had met in the city recognized them as well and spoke to them. In addition, some of the citizens who had already been rescued entered successfully, and little by little, the fear began to fade. At that point, the two sisters began using magic to transport the people to safety. But before they could evacuate all the citizens, one of the soldiers announced that the monsters had drawn near. So Rina handed the task of maintaining the magic over to her sister, while she herself took responsibility for holding the front line and helping everyone by confronting the attack. And while they fought those endless monsters, Kanade and Tanya were already on the verge of collapse from sheer exhaustion. Fortunately, the group of adventurers whom Tanya had once taught a lesson appeared, and this time they had come to help. Nor were they alone, because the Horizon Adventurer team regarded the situation as a special mission worthy of supporting Ryan's team. And so, they took on the role of knights, pushing the attacking monsters away from the city. Since Ariel's party had not joined the battle, Natalie believed that this fight would be extraordinarily difficult. Even Mr. Janes, the owner of the largest weapon shop in the city, offered to support them with combat weapons. All of those weapons were made by his own hands and through his own effort. Everyone was determined to unite their strength in order to protect the city safely and clear the way for Rain's group to advance. As for Nina, when she saw the older brothers and sisters pouring all their strength into protecting one another, she felt a new power beginning to flow from deep within her. Although she was afraid of being hurt or of hurting someone else, when she saw everyone resisting with everything they had, a new idea came to her. On the other side, Rain was drawing closer, but he felt that the distance was still too great for him to reach the demon before him. Then Kanade suggested that Tanya transform into a dragon and fly him upward herself. But Tanya could not do that, because taking that form would make her movements difficult, and even if she drew near, she would become an obvious target and still would not be able to touch him. As for Sora's group's teleportation magic, it was not sufficient for such a purpose, but Nina possessed the ability of more precise teleportation, because she belonged to the ruler's clan, one of the strongest clans. In that moment, Nina ran toward Rain and embraced him. The instant Kanade and Tanya saw her, they remembered that the ruler's clan possessed a special ability that did not exist among the rest of the strongest clans, the control of space for the purpose of teleportation. Then Rain asked her whether she could help him. Although she was a little shy, she agreed to lend him her power. Kanade and Tanya took on the task of destroying the monsters below, while Rain and Nina advanced together toward the demon. And Rain used the shield weapon that Mr. Janes had forged for him in order to avoid the attacks as he moved. When the demon hurled a massive magical sphere at Rain, Nina immediately used teleportation magic, causing him to appear before it in an instant, which confused the demon and made him more cautious. In that moment, Rain began strengthening his inner energy, then suddenly appeared before the demon and tried to seize control of his monsters. The demon could not believe that an ordinary human like this could actually take control away from him. And when he asked him who he was, Rain smiled and said that he was just an ordinary beast tamer. The demon flew into a violent rage, shattered Rain's magical circle, and then charged to attack him. But unexpectedly, Rain ordered the demon's own monsters to attack the demon himself instead of him, and that became more than the demon could bear, and he began to disappear gradually into the void. Even though this had been beyond every one of his expectations, he felt that Rain was an interesting person, and he wanted to know his name before he died. But all he received from Rain was a cold reply. Thus, the situation finally came to an end, but Nina, who had been beside him, was completely exhausted and fell into the void. Fortunately, Tanya managed to catch both of them and save them safely. And then the sunlight finally rose again over Horizon City. After that incident, the city gradually began to return to its normal activity. Stella also officially assumed the position of commander of the Night Division. Rain was confident that if she became the commander, she would be able to change the division in an excellent way. As for all those who had been involved in the corruption case, they were transferred to the royal capital to receive their punishment. Stella also investigated the matter of Nina's little village, and it was said that the villagers had left the village on the day Nina was taken from them. But Rain believed that as long as they were still alive, the day when they would be reunited would surely come, whether soon or far in the future. As for Kanade, she became extremely active in the rebuilding of the city, to the point that it seemed as though she had turned into a true citizen of Horizon. Tanya was still hiding the fact that she belonged to the Dragon Clan, although it was obvious that everyone had known her identity for a long time already. Sora and Rina likewise blended into the life of the city, and sometimes they even went to that old man's hot dog shop to eat there. And although Rain had saved everyone just like a true hero, he still could not bring himself to call himself a hero, because he always felt that he was nothing more than an ordinary beast tamer, the sort one could find anywhere. Kanade's group was always unable to deny just how humble he was, and after they had given him combat support in the battle, Nina too began to wish that her power could become like the power of the other sisters. Ryan understood her feelings and agreed, but he was not confident about it, because he had already formed contracts with everyone. Yet when he looked into their eyes, he decided to take the risk. Before long, Rain succeeded in forming a new contract with Nina. The moment the contract was completed, Kanade and Tanya ran toward the little girl, embracing her and showering her with affection. Even Sora and Rina were overjoyed because they had always wished to have a cute little younger sister like her. After they had gathered together once again, Rain's group went to the guild, and there they saw Stella. They were surprised to find the commander of the Night Division inside the Adventurers Guild on that day. Stella told them that the Adventurers and the Night Division had decided from that point onward to cooperate with one another, and that was why they were currently discussing how to maintain security together. Everyone was extremely happy because things were finally moving in the right direction. Stella was also deeply grateful to everyone, because thanks to Rain's group, she had been able to fulfill her dream of returning the Night Division to its true nature. At that moment, Natalie said that she had something for them. Then she took the opportunity to announce that the guild had decided to promote Rain to C-rank adventurer. Rain felt that she was exaggerating a little, because it had not been very long since he had only just risen past E-rank. But Natalie had a solid reason for advancing him 2 full ranks at once, and she saw no problem in it at all. In fact, she had originally been considering granting him A rank, because in her eyes that would have suited him even more. In addition to that, there was a mountain of money he would receive as a reward, and when Rain felt the weight of the money in his pocket and its warmth, he decided that he would treat everyone to a meal. By the way, Natalie had also cast a glance at Nina as a new face among them, so Rain immediately introduced her as a new companion. Natalie could not hold herself back, and she rushed forward to hug the little girl. But the moment she looked at her closely, she noticed that the girl was from the ruler's clan, and she was struck with amazement. Then she leaned close to Rain and whispered, asking whether Nina would be upset because she had gone too far in treating her like a child. But when Nina replied that she would not mind, Natalie embraced her all over again. After that, the sisters also wanted to spoil Nina together with them. Then Rain began talking about the team, because the group had become very large by now, and the room they were renting was no longer spacious enough for all of them. The moment Natalie heard that, she suggested to Rain that he buy a house, and she told them that the guild itself recommended suitable homes and even provided financial support, especially for adventurers who possessed real strength and wished to settle within the city. The sly look in her eyes was enough to make Tanya feel that she was absolutely determined not to let anyone leave the city. Rain asked everyone what they thought, and it seemed that all of them had agreed to remain in this city. Rain had already saved some money, and now there was also support from the guild, so he decided to sign a contract and purchase a house. After looking at many homes throughout the city, the sisters found nothing they truly liked. Then Natalie presented the final house, and it was comfortable and spacious, so they were immediately drawn to it. The house was built of wood, and it had a large garden, just as Kanade and Sora wanted. It also contained more than 10 rooms, each large enough to hold a big bed, exactly as Tanya had requested. And the kitchen and bathroom that Rina and Nina wanted were fully equipped. Even the furniture suited Rain's budget. At that point, Tanya stood up and asked Natalie why she had not shown them this good house from the beginning. As for Rina, she said that she smelled a conspiracy. Natalie became flustered and stepped back. When everyone's eyes settled on her, she was forced to tell the truth. A woman dressed in white had appeared in that house. The moment Kanade heard about that apparition, she was terrified and hid behind Rain. Tanya was deeply annoyed with her, because it made no sense for someone from one of the strongest clans to be afraid of ghosts. Even this time, the little squirrel girl had to calm her down. At that moment, everyone swallowed nervously as they prepared to hear Natalie's story. So she began describing strange incidents. A pillow flipping over after a nap, hot bath water suddenly turning cold, sugar being switched with salt during a meal, even a rotten egg being placed inside a shoe that had been taken off, and leftover curry from dinner being smeared all over the laundry that had been hung out to dry. The moment they heard that, Kanade was horrified and her tail puffed up instantly. Although they hesitated a little about living in such a place, they also felt at the same time that giving up a house like that would be a great loss. Then Rain suggested something. He said that they should investigate the house first, and only after that decide what they would do. So Ryan's group opened the door and went inside. The entire house was submerged in darkness. Nina sneezed once, and immediately Kanade reached out, grabbed Tanya's tail tightly, and yanked it with all her strength. They all felt that the place did not resemble an abandoned haunted house because it was clean, as though someone was constantly taking care of it. Then suddenly the tables, chairs, and things around them began shaking and moving on their own, and they also heard a voice ordering them to leave the place. And Kanade, who had already been frightened of ghosts from the start, began running around them in sheer panic. Then, all at once, a woman wearing a maid's uniform appeared before them and began driving them out. Sora's group used magic to destroy that little ghost, but the woman appeared again, this time hanging upside down from the ceiling. The sisters started debating which type of magic they should use, because using too much force might destroy both the ghost and the entire house together. The ghost seemed frightened, and yet even so, she kept stirring up chaos in order to drive them out. Tanya noticed that the ghost did not know how to attack properly. When they pointed out her weakness, she grew annoyed. But when she noticed someone whose fear of her was obvious, she pushed her head out from beneath the floor to frighten Kanade, and Kanade immediately started running wildly in every direction. By pure chance, the ghost had pushed Kanade's fear to its utmost limit, so Kanade extended her claws in attack and tore the ghost's clothes apart, leaving the ghost in total confusion. Tanya also noticed another weakness, namely that a physical body could affect a spiritual body, and because Kanade's fear had reached its peak, the ghosts themselves became the ones who were afraid of her. Kanade completely lost her senses, began biting at the dress and smashing things, then suddenly appeared right before the ghost and frightened her so badly that she retreated backward. Sora and Rina seized the opportunity and cast magic on the ceiling so the ghost would not be able to escape. Kanade had raised her fur and was preparing to pounce, but Tanya grabbed her by the neck in midair as though she were an enraged cat. At that point, Rain began negotiating with the ghost. The ghost thought she would take the risk of entering Rain's body, but she failed. Rain had already closed off her path because when he was younger, he had once heard one of his neighbors talking about ghosts and spirit tamers, even though he had not learned from him how exactly to control a ghost like this one. Still, he felt that the ghost before him had a clearer personality than ordinary ghosts, so he thought she might be more willing to listen to him. The ghost tried to move, but Rain grabbed her and pinned her to the ground while she struggled to break free. When the ghost realized that she had lost, Rain granted her the freedom to do as she pleased. But things developed in an unexpected way because Rain held out his hand to shake hers, and the ghost laughed because she found that human strangely amusing. Then she introduced herself as Tina and said that she had once worked as a maid in another city, but had died 30 years ago, and eventually ended up here because she was a spirit that had not passed on. Tanya still could not understand why she had become a ghost. After that, Tina told them her story. She said that her former master had been a twisted and evil man, obsessed with girls and given to tormenting them, and that she had been one of his victims. When she finally understood what had happened to her, she opened her eyes to find that she had become a ghost, and because she had lost to Rain's group, she agreed to leave the place. Rain asked Kanade what she thought, and she replied that even though she was frightened, as long as she stayed with everyone, she would probably grow used to it little by little. Then Rain asked Tina for permission to let them live there. Tina was a little surprised, because she had intended to leave, but Rain pointed out that her existence was exactly what had made the house so cheap, and he suggested that she stay with them. As for Kanade, she asked only that Tina not pass through walls to frighten them. Sora and Rina thought that, since she had been a maid, she would surely be excellent at cooking, and they even thought of asking her to teach them. Everyone warmly welcomed Tina, so she agreed to stay with them. After that, Rain successfully signed the contract to purchase the house. Natalie was greatly astonished by him because he had actually managed to befriend a ghost, which only showed how extraordinary he truly was. Meanwhile, in the market, the old man who sold fruit was busy with his work when he encountered the hero party led by Arios. He offered to choose food for them that would be enough for an entire week, but they had not brought any money. Instead, they displayed the hero card in order to receive the food for free. The shopkeeper immediately refused because he did not have enough goods for them. When they kept repeating their identity as the hero party, the old man grew deeply irritated and rebuked them because they had not helped Horizon when it needed them, and they had not understood the true weight of their position. In fact, the other merchants also refused to provide them with food. The people around them began mocking and criticizing them, and that angered Arios, so he withdrew. And the moment he heard Rain's name, his hatred for him only deepened further and further. On the other side, Rain was returning from the market with Kanade. Suddenly, Kanade rushed in front of him and opened her mouth as though welcoming him, which caught him by surprise. That night, they all held a housewarming celebration for the new home. All the food had been prepared by Rina after receiving instructions from Tina. Rina was very confident that from now on, she, not her sister, would be the one in charge of cooking. There was so much food that little Nina did not know where to begin. As for Kanade and Tanya, they could not restrain themselves at all, so they immediately began searching for their favorite food, meat, and started devouring it at once. In that warm atmosphere, little Nina received a great deal of love and affection. Afterward, she expressed her gratitude to Ryan because he had made it so that she was no longer alone. Nina's words brought Ryan's past back to his mind once again. On the day he had lost everything, there had been a great emptiness in his heart. But things were different now, because today they had become true companions. When Tina saw that, she admired them greatly. Although his adventure with Arios' group had failed to fill the emptiness in his heart, once he became an adventurer, lived freely, and met everyone, he felt a warmth he had never known before. In an emotional moment, his eyes filled with tears without meaning to, but he said that the reason was simply hunger. After that, everyone began eating the food of the new home together, and here the story comes to an end, my dear viewer. We hope that you liked it and truly enjoyed it. And if you would like to see season 2, then let me know in the comments. Before you close the video, do not forget to press the like button to support us, subscribe to follow more episodes, and activate the notification bell so you can watch every new anime that appears on the channel. Write your opinions for us in the comments, and we will meet again in new episodes. Goodbye.